Hi, I'm Jan Ozer. I'm here today with Simon Karbowski, who is CEO of StreamVX. Hi, Simon. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Anne. Thanks for having me.
Can you give us the 30-second overview of where you're located and the product and services that you provide?
Sure. So we are a product company, software product company from Poland. We're located in Gdańsk, a famous city on north of Poland. We basically moving appliances towards software solutions. So what we do on a daily basis, we're trying to accommodate different problems on the OTT environments, like transcoding, packaging, and delivery networks. We empower the new revenue models. We're trying to enrich the video systems. We into the digital advertisement, optimizing the costs, lowering the power usage. We're delivering the critical components into the systems of different operators and trying to do our products as much as scalable as possible, and also moving them towards the new modern deployments like cloud or on-premise and mixed models.
Okay, and who is your typical client? How would you describe them and their needs?
So typically I would say that our client will be the pay TV operator or the broadcaster telco. That's basically, or streaming companies. It's various parties which have anything in common with video, basically. What giving us the let's say common ground here is that we aiming towards those customers to deliver the new technology towards the ecosystems, or we want to introduce a new technology, change the codecs, solve the problems, and our flexibility in our products is giving a huge advantage in this parties.
So you call yourself a software company. What is the typical way that you deliver your products?
So typically, we're delivering this on the customer hardware. So customer choosing the hardware. As I mentioned before, there's also very often and more popular scenario where we're deploying this on AWS or Google Cloud or Azure. So basically in the cloud, there are a lot of mixed scenarios or hybrid scenarios, if you prefer to call it like that. So that's typical. But of course, we have different products. So sometimes the products are allowing to do this as simple as that. And when it comes to transcoders, so VX transcoder in our case, the product name is, it's a little more sophisticated because we usually need to advise a little more on the hardware part. And in this case, as we know, we can do this on the CPU, we can do this on the GPU, but we can also do this on the ASICs, as we do this with NETINT, which we have a great partnership right now. So basically, to quickly answer you the question, we recommend the hardware, and considering that the customer saying, let's say, I want to transcode so and so much channels with that kind of ladders, we're trying to figure out the best approach to cover this scenario. And we probably want to go a little more into the details further on our discussion today, but an ASIC approach here is winning in plenty of scenarios. Yeah?
One of the biggest trends that are pushing encoding decisions in Europe particularly is rising energy costs. What are you seeing from your prospects and your customers about energy going forward, and how they select their encoding products?
Yeah, that's very, very important factor, as you said. In Europe right now, we see more and more questions, and actually it's very, very precise questions. We're getting straightforward questions like, okay, how much on a daily basis or how much per channel it will consume the power. So again, as we know, it's not so obvious to answer that kind of question because nobody before was paying so much attention into the power consumption in the video systems as far and as detailed. But the good news is that as much as all RFPs are touching that, again, thanks to cooperation with NETINT, this kind of answers are coming a little easier and on the winning side, because there are a lot of advantages on this part.
Give us an overview. I mean, you can encode in software, you can code with GPUs, and you can code with ASICs. How do they compare from a watt consumption per stream basis?
Yeah, so of course there are some basic differences, and the density is the one, but it's not coming to the power answer. So probably we'll touch it a little later. But if it comes to powers, the NETINT quadras like T480s are using just 7 watts of power, and in our benchmarks is very capable to comparing to GPU is really like 100 times much more power on the GPU. Of course, the GPU itself is doing a lot of different things which we're not using in the transcoding, but that's not the case, because at the end of the day, the bill comes for the whole device. Yeah. So here the power usage is on the ASIC part winning significantly, because if you're going directly to the software side and doing this just on the CPU, the power is maybe a little better, but then we have to remember that the density or amount of the streams which we can do directly on the CPU is really low. Yeah. So even though we will get it a little maybe better on the power side, the amount of the servers, so in total cost of the ownership is going to be completely behind on a comparison scale. So no worth of mentioning, I would say. Yeah?
So you're saying that it takes many more computers running to equal the density of a single computer with multiple T408s, for example.
That's basically going to take a lot of CPUs, a lot of servers to do the same job which we can do on one ASIC.
So swapping ASICs for servers is a real win-win for your customers who are looking to cut their power costs.
That's exactly the point. What we basically are proving in more and more cases right now is that because basically VX Transcoder is a software which is leveraging different platforms for doing the transcoding tasks. And of course, as I mentioned, we have a different scenarios trained and checked. And we have a different, let's say, deployments. But then ASICs come with really unusual density, I would say. Yeah? It's of course because the ASIC is dedicated, as the name states, is dedicated for particular task. And as we said, CPU is generally for everything. So it's not dense enough. It's capable to do a lot of stuff, but not only the transcoding or encoding. And the GPU is pretty capable on the encoding, not as much capable as a ASIC, but then it's doing a lot of stuff and it's consuming a lot of power. So nowadays, I would say that's not necessarily the best choice.
Do you have any customer success stories that you can share of saving power by switching to ASICs?
Yeah, we basically having right now or participating right now in the several RFPs, several POCs with the customers, and as I mentioned before, the winning trend here for the combined solution, so StreamVX software on top of NETINT ASICs is basically beating everybody on the density and on the power usage. So what we see already as a really impressive numbers, we can squeeze like 30 channels, 30, out of one RU unit, comparing to similar configuration on 2 RU units. So already like a half of the rack space. Coming to the power usage is really like a significant difference, because this 1 RU unit we're speaking about, the server is using barely 700 watts, and the 2 RU unit is using 1.500, so twice more basically. Yeah? And the density is at least 30% more channels out of half of the space. So let's say KPIs here are impressive, and at the end of the day, the simple scenario where we basically can do this like almost plug and play is even better than. Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to hear about power, but quality is always critical for any service. One of the older knocks about hardware encoders was that the quality couldn't match software. What's been your experience there?
On the one side, we have a lot of movement in the video market. We know, and we're speaking very often together about that. That it's moving very fast, and the amount of video is rising rapidly, and it's going to be higher and higher every day. But the quality, in my opinion, is getting towards the point where it's one of the major differentiators on the market. So if you want really to push further your service, or you want to gain more or gain more traffic on the platform, gain more customers, the quality is the factor which will differentiate you. And when it comes to NETINT, again, the quality is something which we got quite impressed about, because okay, if we can squeeze it on the software transcoding, we can go pretty high with the quality, but again, the density is really suffering here. And on the NETINT, we see very often we see two factors which gets very important, let's say, subjective impression on the quality level. One is ultra low latency, which we can squeeze with the hardware of ASICs, which is very important for the sports or in general live events, because then you want to be really fast and just after actual camera or the source feed. But on the offline, when we have a little more time and better settings for the transcoding, then we see VMAF scores like 96, 90, 98 even sometimes, which is not so easy to squeeze out of the software. But even if you do that, you're basically doing just one movie per one machine, which is useless because it's wasting a lot of power and a lot of resources. Yeah? So the quality here is, in my opinion, very important, but also NETINT is quite impressive on that factors.
Okay. Well, you mentioned latency. How many of your customers care about latency?
It's always about the use cases. For us, every customer is a different use case. Our flexibility here wins a lot of cases because we really understand the video. As you guys understand the video, it's a very strange animal. So you have to feel if this really matters or not. There are some customers, as we spoke in the second before, which needs a live sports or gaming events transmitted, that kind of things, which latency is critical, basically. Yeah? And there are some customers which just have VOD libraries where the latency is not so critical. That's just offline stuff. So then the quality is probably the bigger priority. So it depends. But again, here, as I mentioned before, latency is going a little towards one of the quality factors in our opinion. Our observation in the market is the latency is also considered as a part of the quality. And with NETINT, we can squeeze something around 10 milliseconds, which is really also impressive. Very useful for the live events. Definitely very useful, yeah? And quite impressive again comparing to the software solutions.
You put that in perspective for us. I mean, if I'm watching a soccer match on TV, what's my latency going to be if I'm watching over cable, and what's it going to be if I'm watching via streaming, say with one of your systems?
Yeah, it's very good question. Very hard to answer precisely because every single ecosystem we see on the market and in our customers' cases is really different. So those architectures are basically hard to compare. But the good point here for you is that we see a huge difference into the transcoding platforms which are deployed in the legacy systems, like a lot of cables are using still right now on the broadcast, while we see even 20 or 25 seconds delay towards the actual feeds. And again, on the systems where just on the transcoding, we're getting 10 milliseconds delay. Even if we add, let's say, another dot towards the distribution, we're still far away from this 20 seconds. So That's, in our opinion, it's a huge difference, and it's a huge jump towards being really closer to the live feeds. Yeah? It's significant difference. But again, there are, of course, and I'm not saying there aren't, a lot of deployments which are having this differently applied, and it's getting closer. But definitely, ASIC approach from NETINT is making this much easier, because this critical part, which is on the hardware processing of the source feeds, is narrowed towards the really impressive times.
Talk to me about integration. So if I have a system that's depending upon software encoding at this point, and I want to switch to ASICs, what's the integration task look like, and how long is that going to take?
Yeah, that's probably the whole thing behind our partnership with NETINT, and the whole trick here that we are a software company. We've been allowed to, thanks to this great cooperation, to integrate very deeply with the ASICs. So what we did, we basically hidden all the magic and all the heavy lifting which is done by the ASICs in behind, of course. To do this fast and good quality, great quality transcoding in the back. We hidden this in the nice UI and the nice, or an API if you prefer to use API, in the nice API to control this with a few clicks and easy and fast. So from the perspective of the customer, if you're speaking a really easy case, we're just getting some inputs and we're just setting up some outputs, and that's it. So it's going to be a few hours, basically, the simplest possible case. If we're doing some retrofits or we're changing the architecture, we're speaking about maybe more sophisticated redundancy scenarios, it's going to be longer. But the whole thing here is that it's a software-defined solution with really well integrated hardware. So this part is completely behind anything, and customer doesn't care about that. The whole integration is about the, let's say, architecture and fitting it towards the needs of the customer. That's of course our job. That's what we do. But that's again case by case approach. What is critical here, I would say, is that our approach and NETINT approach is very similar. That's why we really like this cooperation, because we really focus on the solving the problems. We really focus on the customer cases. So this combined powers giving us really flexibility that we can say it's a plug and play, because we basically can deliver something which you just giving us this inputs, giving us the needs on the output, and we will simply deliver. Eh?
Okay, so the customer sees nothing but lower power bills and higher density, and you handle the rest.
Yeah, that's basically the whole thing here. What's important here is we have to remember that, and we both know that, that the whole fuss behind how it's happened and what exact parameters you have to add to that, you can mess up in a plenty of places. But most of the cases, if we hit this whole things behind nice UI, we cover 99% of the cases. And then if customers needs more expertise, that's where we come. We fixing this, we fine tuning, we advising, or we, as we spoke, deploying very sophisticated redundancy scenarios to just make sure it's never fails. Yeah.
So what other hardware do you consider in potential deployment, say moving from software only to hardware assisted?
We have different experiences, and we're doing this quite some time already. So we, of course, again, as a software solution, we can run it on the CPU, we can run it on the GPU, and we can run it on the ASICs. We integrated different hardware accelerations, but most of the cases which we see right now, again, which we mentioned already, are taking a more and more care and more interest into the power usage and the density from obvious reasons. And as much as right now is the case in Europe, because we know the crisis situation, all the stuff, and in my opinion, it's going to evolve. It's going to be very important globally very soon. Yeah. Because the rise of the amount of the video which is produced and so on, so it will simply enforce everybody to take care about the density and the power bills. So what happens and what we see is that the ASIC advantage in front of GPU is really significant. So we can really go like a 10, 20, even 30 times sometimes the density with the much lower usage. So if you're counting this ventures like TCO 3 years, it's really easily covering the whole cost on the difference, yeah, on the power bills. So it's really so significant, yeah. And of course we can run different accelerations, but what we see right now is really migration towards the efficiency. So we probably even gonna see soon retrofit cases, like somebody will gonna want to exchange some hardware for the more efficient, which again in our software case is very easy. And similarly with the NETINT, which is based on the interfaces which can match probably any server, virtually any server on the market, because the interfaces you can use for connecting the hardware towards the server is universal, as our software can universally run on any server. So it's again perfect match. We can basically even rescue a little older systems if they want to optimize. Yeah.
You mentioned payback period. What are you seeing as the payback period for a T408 type installation?
Yeah, that's of course coming to the scale question again. But what we're doing right now in the RFPs and the cases we right now working on, it's usually 3 years, which easily excuse the cost. So that's not as long, I would say, but it depends on the scale. It's probably a lot of cases which are going to make it faster. There are some cases which may be big installations or recent installations which are maybe not so power consuming. But in general, it's not anymore discussion that you're really looking for a single person. With the density gains we're getting on this kind of approaches, it's really easy to catch the moment you're getting back the money. Yeah?
Okay, and nobody's predicting that power pricing is going to go down in the near term. It looks like it's always going to be going up.
Yeah, probably if we both know that, we would be rich, or we're not going to be sitting here. Nobody knows, honestly, and nobody was expecting pandemic or the war in Ukraine, so it's not so easy to answer. Definitely it's going to happen like that or that. What we can be sure for, in my opinion, that's, and we see this from years, and it's gaining more traction right now, that amount of the video produced and the live video produced right now is rising rapidly. And amount of the video content is rising rapidly all the time. So the amount of the infrastructure which is processing the video is also need to be raised. So definitely this cost is going to be taken into account more and more. And we have to remember that not only the live video is here, but there is a lot of offline content which is there and must be processed somehow. There is a lot of gaming content which is being streamed. Okay, that's also live, but it's a little different animal here. Yeah? There is a lot of advertisement market which is needing the transcoding as well. So there is a lot of different places where this video processing is very important. So even the prices will gonna stay like that. The scale gonna rise, and the cost gonna get to the attention and gonna be kept low by density again, in my opinion.
So summarize that, if I'm out looking for encoding hardware, we've talked about cost, we've talked about power, we've talked about latency, we've talked about quality, we've talked about interface. Are there any other factors that potential buyers of encoding products should consider?
Yeah, probably a lot of them, but I have to mention a few I really like with the cooperation we've got here, because the video itself is really ugly animal, yeah. So very important in the environment we're working with is really awareness of what the video is and how to behave with the video. And again, StreamVX coming with a lot of history in the industry, and NETINT with a lot of experience there. this is a perfect couple to deliver a partnership which will give a video venture in the right place, because it's really, really important to understand how to take care about the video itself. The other part is all this quality stuff, which we spoke briefly. That really there is a lot of video on the market again, but the quality is starting to be differentiator. In my opinion, it's really going to be huge, because okay, we're speaking about the 4K, we're speaking about the 8K, but we're still seeing really ugly even HD, but it's not HD, it's not even close to the HD. So we're still seeing a lot of streams which claim to be HD, but they're far away from the quality we're expecting from the HD streams. And this is also very important to remember that that's not necessarily have to be like that, yeah, and that it shouldn't be like that. So that's another factor we have to take care about. And very important is this flexibility, yeah? The flexibility of the vendors of the solution or the product you're choosing for the transcoding or encoding, because we have to remember that the use cases or the amount of streams you want to process are changing, and the conditions are changing, or inputs are changing, and the flexibility of the product is very, very important, because we see right now in our experience that there are a lot of appliances which are, as usually appliance, it's built to do one function, yeah? And we're living in the times where the software approach, where the function changes with the update of the software, and it's as easy as possible, just click and here you go. That's something which customers expect right now, yeah? And on top of that, if you want to make really sophisticated or high availability scenarios where you don't want to allow it to fail on the live event, or you don't want to allow to fail the VOD system on the I don't know, dozens or thousands of customers, you want to be sure that this solution you choose is really capable to do that. And again, in the software defined proper design as the StreamVX with the proper hardware below, which going to be like NETINT, always on time and very fast, low latency and good quality. That's really perfect match in my opinion.
Okay, well, that sounds like a perfect ending to this interview. I appreciate your time,
Thanks.
Szumon, and talk to you soon.